Good morning, everybody, and happy Monday. I feel like the weekends are flying by so much faster now than they were at the beginning of this pandemic. But the weekend actually went a little bit faster, I'm sure, for our own Lauren Sisler, who also works with ESPN. And I'm sure it went a little bit faster because Lauren had the experience of covering the first college football game that was played during this pandemic. I know she has a lot to say about this, has a lot of feedback she can give us on how it was just to be on the field and to be doing something that, we would normally do in a normal year, but how it's going to happen this year in the time of COVID. So if you didn't catch it, Lauren did write a column for AL.com about her experience covering that game. We will leave it here in the comments. So if you want to get her full opinion of that, you can click on that link and read it and let us know what you think there. But today we have Lauren in the flesh to tell us all about it. Lauren, thanks so much for getting up and coming on today. I know you've had a busy weekend, and I'm sure you've got a busy week ahead.
Yeah, it's certainly been a busy few days, especially obviously the football game, and then of course having the opportunity to sort of share my experiences. As I said, I just popped up the ponytail and got myself ready to go. College football is here. So what, first and foremost, I think that a lot of people have been counting down to this day, obviously questioning whether this day was ever going to happen here in this 2020 year. Obviously in the midst of the pandemic. So the fact that we finally got to a point to say, okay, we feel that the protocols are in place. We've done everything we can to ensure the safety and the health of the players, the officials, the coaches, but also everyone else that will be at the stadium covering the football game as well, doing our due diligence to make sure that is the case, that we feel safe enough that we can move forward and have this football game. And so here we are, week 0, game 1 in the books, and just thankful to be part of that coverage.
Well, so if you're just joining us, this is our own AL.com's and ESPN's Lauren Sisler. Now, Lauren covered the FCS kickoff game on Saturday in Montgomery. That was with Austin Peay in Central Arkansas. And again, that was the first college football game that has been played during this pandemic. Interesting note that Lauren made is it has been 170 days since the last NCAA sanctioned sporting event was played. So Lauren, I'm sure that was just a experience you never expected or probably ever wanted in your career, to be at the first game that had been played at over 100 days. But I know sports is something that is so ingrained in you, and that's part of your life. So did it feel good to get out on the field, even though it wasn't what you're used to?
Yeah, it honestly, it was almost like a breath of fresh air. It was something that we've been counting down to, something we've almost been holding our breaths for, right? Because there's been so many variables, so many things that have transpired in obviously these recent months. You said it, 170 days. I think that alone, just to know that the sports world, and especially the college sports world, has been on hold for 170 days, that is monumental and something that's never happened in the history of college sports. And I think it's crazy because, being able to cover that first college football game, I covered that same game last year, the FCS kickoff as well. And it was a monumental year because it was the 150th year of college football. And so, it was a pretty big deal. But then this year, I mean, if I have to say, and as I pointed out in that column, this is absolutely the biggest game that I've ever been a part of and covered, because of the magnitude and because of what historically we're embarking on right here in this moment. But being a part of it was such an opportunity, such a blessing, and really just sort of opened your eyes to sort of kind of what's ahead. And obviously we're constantly having to pivot. We're constantly having to make changes. But I think as a whole, as a country, we're learning as we go. And I think that's going to be the case for college football as teams get out on the field, as personnel get out on the field, as ESPN, continues their coverage of these games amongst the other networks. The evolution of what this thing's going to look like week in and week out, I think, is going to change as more data becomes available, and as we just continue to learn more about this pandemic every day. You've been covering it since day one, and you know that it's a revolving door, and it's the evolution of it is just constantly continuing over and over and over again.
Right. I mean, and you're so right. We've been doing this every day since the pandemic happened, and also just reporting on it in so many different ways. And there are new things that come out every day about this virus, or things that are said that are maybe changing, and everything is changing on this day. So it is just something that is hard to keep up with for everybody, let alone for organized players, organized sports that are having to produce an entire season and having to plan for months ahead when you don't even know what's happening tomorrow, let alone months down the road. We should note that this FCS game kickoff was played. The first college football game was played in Montgomery, in Alabama, in the Crampton Bowl in Montgomery. So that's a big step, too, for the state to have that first game. And it's a lot of responsibility for those teams, for the state, for the venue, and for everybody to say, okay, are we going to set the standard for college football going forward? Are we going to set the standard for just having events going forward? So what did you take away from that experience about the preparation for the game?
Yeah, so obviously, kind of going into it, I learned my assignment, I guess, about a week and a couple days before the game kicked off. So that's when I actually learned that I would be covering this game. And then from there, it was a lot of meetings happening behind the scenes, obviously with ESPN, with operations, with even the officiating crew. Steve Shaw did a great job of outlining some of the new officiating rules that were in place, and that would be in place this season because of COVID. A lot of those things have changed. And some other things they're also implementing as well is the opportunity for teams to be able to use their opinions and be able to stand for something. So they're also implementing that as well, that players can start putting things on the back of their jerseys, obviously change up their nameplates if they have something they want to focus on, a voice of movement, and giving that opportunity to these players. So there's a lot that's happening in terms of that. But in terms of the preparation, you said it, Montgomery obviously kind of setting that tone, setting that precedent. And really that's sort of what we learned from the football teams as well. Obviously, Austin P being in Tennessee, and then Central Arkansas being there in Conway, Arkansas, both those teams traveling in, both those teams bussing in. And, really they said this too, we have to set the precedent. We have to send the message to college football. All the work that we've put in, all the protocols that we're following, the constant testing, the making sure everyone's healthy and safe, and obviously containing the virus the best that we absolutely can. We're setting that precedent. So yes, we have to wear masks on the sidelines when our helmets aren't on. The coaches are expected to wear their masks as well. And then, of course, the officiating crews and everyone on the ground. For myself, ESPN had our masks on for the entirety of the game. And with that being said, one of the football players for Austin P said it best, Jeremiah Oatsball, said, we have to love college football more than we hate wearing a mask. And that's what the bottom line is. And I think that really they set a good precedent and to set a good tone. But, for the state of Alabama to be able to kind of kick things off and obviously sort of have that there, for all eyeballs to see in the entire country, because I think there was a lot of curiosity as to how this thing was going to play out. And, honestly, I think they did a wonderful job. Obviously, the security that was there, everyone that was there to make sure people could get to their seats, and the distance was there. There were 2,000 fans in the stands. I know a lot of people wanted to know that. That stadium, I guess they ended up allotting 2,000. I think that stadium holds about 22,000. So that was sort of the protocols they put in place. So everyone was very social distanced in the stadium. You could see everyone sort of took their own spots and, really kind of followed that protocol throughout much of the game. I saw people wearing their masks. Everybody seemed to be doing their part to follow those guidelines and protocols. And despite it being 80 some degrees there at 8 o'clock at night, I've never had to wear a mask for longer than about an hour at a time. So 7 hours was definitely a marathon for me, but we got it done.
But you did it. You survived to tell us about it. We've got Hal saying that he was watching you and that you did a great job on Saturday. And Hal, I know she appreciates that. We've got so many comments about people just saying, look, I'm just ready for football. And I've heard from so many people that say, look, I don't care if there are fans. I don't care if there's this, that, or the other. I just want to watch it. I just want to sit down and watch some football and have some normalcy happening in my life. But we have to remember these players. These are college age players. They are young men, and they at the same time are also having to worry about being exposed themselves. So when you talk about these teams getting bussed in, and obviously they had to stay at some sort of hotel, I'm assuming, how were, or do you know if there were precautions taken for those players? Were they required to wear masks on the buses, or were they distanced on the buses?
Yeah, that's a great question. First and foremost, I'll start by saying that and this is not necessarily uniform for every team across the board from what I know. And of course, covering these two teams, both teams got tested on Wednesday. Results were provided to them on Thursday, which determined what their travel roster would look like. And I guess Austin Peay did not release those numbers and information to us directly. That was something that they said that they, part of their school guidelines is that information would not be released. On the other side, Central Arkansas was very forthcoming with that information and, what had transpired. So essentially, they've only had 3 positive tests of COVID since the team returned to action and came back for mandatory practices. One of those happened kind of early on, 2 this past week, both of which were not on the travel roster. And so, I think that they feel very confident that they've done a good job of containing it in that capacity. So of course they get their test, they get the travel roster together, and then when they bus in, essentially what I'm kind of learning, and most schools are doing this, is that the guys will, they're adding an additional bus or 2 to the fleet so that they can distance guys on the bus, and so that they're able to not have to sit next to one another and have more space, obviously, on the bus, and not having to, being able to have that at least 6 feet of social distancing, on the bus, and not having to share rows or whatever. So that's part of it. And then of course they do go to the team hotel, and obviously the wearing of masks is expected, and just really kind of containing everybody and making sure that, they're properly, cleaning and sanitizing things. And then obviously when they get out on the football field, just a couple things to note that sort of changed from previously, the plastic water bottles, the use of kind of sharing water bottles, kind of went out the window. They had the plastic cups on the sidelines that could be disposed of. That was a big one. Of course, the masks and the gaiters that you can pull up over your face, the players would wear. So when they go in and out, they're able to quickly be able to pull those up and pull those down. And then, that was a big one. And then also social distancing on the sidelines is worth noting, that there's a team area box that typically would go from the 25-yard line to the 25-yard line. So that space is where the team has their benches and they're able to spread out. They've now extended that an additional 20 yards to allow for more distancing for the players to be able to do so. And then another interesting note is with the officials. The officials typically use a whistle to, start and stop plays. They now are using electronic whistles. So now that will help to, contain obviously, some of the blowing of the whistle, the spit that could be coming from that. They now have a button on their belt, or a device that kind of looks about that big, that they press a button that signals the whistle and, stops the play. And so those are just kind of different things that you don't even think of. With the officiating crew, I had no idea that this was something that was even being talked about with an electronic whistle. Like, who would have thought about that, right? And so
I would have never thought about a whistle, and it makes total sense, but I would have never thought about a traditional whistle that we're all used to using, that causing some sort of issue or presenting a risk. That would have never crossed my mind. And I think that probably most people, and you're obviously more in this world than I am, and if you didn't think of it, I'm sure most people didn't. So it's interesting, those little steps that they're taking to make this feel more safe for players, coaches, fans, everybody in attendance. Those electronic whistles, were they effective, or were they loud enough?
Well, that's a great question. And so with the electronic whistle too, I think also having, with the officiating crew wearing their masks, they were allowed to pull those down as long as they could be socially distanced. But obviously in the middle of play, when they're obviously having that communication with one another, think about that. You've got a mask on. What are you going to pull it down, try to blow the whistle, put it back up? There's a lot going on. But in terms of the audible aspect of the whistle, that was a bit of a concern. And after talking to the Central Arkansas coach, he said that was, they were tough to hear at first. Kind of getting used to that. And then talking to one of the members of the officiating crew said, getting used to like reaching down and finding that button so quickly. Cause you think about it, you're out there, you're having to be the eyes and ears as an official, as an official, you're on the sidelines, there's a lot going on, and you're used to that routine that you have to be able to, blow your whistle, obviously pull the flag and that sort of thing. All of a sudden that all goes out the window. And so, I think that there's going to be some getting used to on both the official side and obviously the coaching side as well, being able to audibly hear those whistles and call the player, even if there's a timeout, signaling that and making sure everything and everyone can hear that. Obviously, the limited number of fans in the stands lowers that noise level a little bit, but we're talking, there's a big difference in a stadium like this that, only holds 22,000, had 2,000. You go to an SEC school where we're going to have, upwards of 20 some thousand, to meet that criteria for 20%. So, that could certainly change things as well as things obviously get louder, and, communication can certainly be an issue, but I think it's just a matter of people kind of getting used to it and sort of, adjusting accordingly. And I think they'll start to come up with more protocols and things that will help with that.
And it's funny you talk about the players, especially wearing those masks that are the neck gaiters that you can pull down and then pull up and down. Maybe I should be a football player. I feel like I bought one of those and I could hardly get it over my head to even be able to pull it up. So apparently I have a larger head than most of these football players, but good for them. That, I'm sure that is the easiest option, just to pull up. And I would have never thought, like you said, about if you're going to blow a whistle, you have to pull it down and blow your whistle and pull it back up. I've caught myself so many times in public having my mask on and wanting to take a sip of water or whatever. And I have almost just done it with a mask on and spilled it over myself.
Yes, I have done the same thing. You don't think about it. And it's kind of crazy because I did have my water bottle in my book bag. So a couple times, obviously, when I would circle back around the field, I would pull it up, get a drink of water. And, I think that is another aspect of this, is staying hydrated, especially when you're out there for, a 60-minute football game, which, in real time ends up being, nearly 3.5 to 4 hours, ensuring that you are getting that hydration, that you are, obviously following the protocols, but also taking care of your well-being, because, it was nighttime, but when you flip to an 11 o'clock kickoff here in Alabama in September, when you've got 90-degree weather and the sun is beating down on you, I think that's going to be another important component, is that you find that balance, of being able to stay hydrated, and the players are going to be dealing with that just as much as the event staff and the other people that are out there, kind of running the show and making sure everything is intact.
You talk about the people out there, the people on the field, and I know we had in this specific bowl, in the Crampton Bowl in Montgomery, there were about 2,000 fans, you said. But who are the people that are not on site? I know that you mentioned maybe some commentators that were not on site that you're used to seeing.
Yeah, so that was a lot different too. So kind of the way things with ESPN specifically have things set up this year, there will be a number of crews that will be broadcasting remotely. And so I'm used to doing broadcasts remotely. And what that means is essentially we have a percentage of our crew on site, on the ground, and then a percentage of our crew, mostly the production crew. So the people in the control room that are punching the buttons, obviously making sure everything is sort of pieced together. The graphics are coming in, the audio, all this stuff. So that's sort of the
brains behind the production.
Yes, the brains behind the production. That's what I'm looking for. And so, like, you that's sort of where the heartbeat is, obviously. Well, the big difference is I'm accustomed to being on site with my play-by-play person as well as my analyst. So you've got your guys. Now, granted, they're going to be up in the booth. So when I'm on the sidelines, they're up in the booth doing their thing, but I'm able to sort of communicate with them in real time. And there is going to be a delay, because as you broadcast the signal, there's a delay from Bristol, where the game was being broadcast from, bounces off the satellite, obviously back up. So there's about a 3-second delay. So communication can also be, more challenging, and trying to kind of control that as I'm having real-time conversations, and then also conversations that are somewhat delayed, because I'm hearing things at a different speed or pace or timing than is actually happening or coming across on the air.
Which can be for people who have never, I guess, had somebody talking in their ear when they're talking, it can be extremely distracting if you are having a delay, and if you're trying to talk about something and it hasn't gotten to that person yet. I can imagine that that can be extremely frustrating or extremely hard to get used to in this time of COVID. Now, we've got a question that I think is really interesting, and wouldn't have thought to ask it, but somebody asked about ratings. Now, I wonder, I know this was the FCS kickoff game. Ratings wise, typically, I'm not sure how well watched that is. But this year, since it has been 170 days without a NCAA sanctioned event, did more people tune in to watch this game just to get a little bit of a sense of normalcy?
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen the actual ratings thus far. That I have not seen any reports come out yet. I imagine those will come out shortly. But from all accounts, based on the traffic I was seeing on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else, there were a lot of people tuned into this game. And as you said, that that's not to put down the two opponents that were playing, the two teams. Tremendous talent. Two great teams. But to your point, it's not a game that most people would typically tune into if there was another game on, or, obviously another game in the SEC or whatever it is. And so I think just the idea that this was the kickoff to the 2020 college football season, something we've been waiting for such a long time, the first collegiate sport since things shut down back in March, being a big part of that. And I think really the curiosity of knowing or wanting to know, what is this thing going to look like? Like, how is football going to be different? How are things going to be different this season than what we're accustomed to? And I think that was, kind of a spectacle in and of itself, and something that people were anxious to see. And, you see in the column there's that one picture of me on the sidelines, doing an interview with the coach. And so I think that's kind of an interesting sort of byproduct of the protocols that are being put in place, that I no longer can get up and real close and personal with the coach and kind of do this where I'm, basically almost face to face with them. There is that 6 foot of social distancing that's still happening. And, for us to be able to have that communication, but from a distance where they can hear me and I can hear them, and that we can still have that conversation. To me, it felt like a 2-person press conference, honestly. So that was kind of interesting in and of itself. But
I've seen some photos that have come out of fall camp from both University of Alabama and from Auburn. And I saw one from Nick Saban where he had one of those clear masks. And
yes,
that's such a great idea, especially so you don't have to scream across your 6 feet from being muffled, or making sure you're pronouncing things correctly so where somebody can understand you. Those, I'm sure that you wish all the coaches would have those clear masks.
The lip reading is huge, especially with our jobs, being able to lip read and see what they're saying. And so I think being able to, it's not in football, and really in any sport, it's not just the verbal cues, it's also the nonverbal cues, and being able to see the expression and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, seeing those clear plastic masks, would love to get a hold of one of those. My hairdresser,
Saban, if you're watching, we need some. Send us some, please.
I told Kristen Saban, I said, you got to tell me where he got one of those. I need one of those. I've seen them floating around, but my hairdresser had one as well, and it kind of like hooks to your chin, and so the shield is there, but it also helps, again, because you can see facial expression. You're essentially seeing someone, you're able to see them smile, you're able to see them talk. The biggest difference is it just kind of hooks to your chin and sort of, goes this way. And then also, serves its purpose, accordingly. But yeah, the clear ones I think would be a good way to go, for sure.
Because obviously I make those decisions for all these teams. So that's my 2 cents here. Now, before I let you go, we got to talk about who's next. I know UAB plays on Thursday. What other games do we have coming up this week?
Yeah, so there's a multitude of games. There's a game in Memphis. I'd actually need to pull up the schedule really quick. I'm going to do that right now so I can get this right.
You do that. I'm sure we would rather take a second and get it right, Lauren.
Yes, I want to make sure I get it right, because there's only a handful. Because keep in mind, the leagues have, I guess, staggered when they're going to be starting. And so things are going to be a little bit different in terms of their start time. So remember, the ACC, they don't start until September 5th. So this upcoming weekend on Saturday, the ACC starts their schedule, and they're one of the Power Five. And then, of course, the SEC does not start until the 26th. And, that was a big thing for the SEC and Commissioner Sankey, was that we want to practice patience. We want to do all that we can to have all the data in, and obviously everything we can to be able to do so. But coming up, obviously, as you said, Central Arkansas, UAB, that'll be on ESPN3. That'll be at Legion Field. And then, let's see, South Alabama and Southern Mississippi are also playing on Thursday. And then on Saturday, quite a few matchups there. Let's see, to point out, Arkansas State at Memphis. That's a big game, and that'll be on ESPN. Eastern Kentucky at Marshall will also be on ESPN. And then, let's see, SMU at Texas State will be on ESPN. And then the big one on Monday, September 7th, that's BYU versus Navy. Will also be on the main ESPN channel. So yeah, that's the game plan, and then we'll just see where we go from here. But it's kind of a week to week, a fluid situation. I'll be interested in seeing if any protocols or anything changes drastically from week 1 to week 2, and so on and so forth, as we start to kind of get through this thing.
Like you said, it's fluid, is ever evolving, and I know you're seeing that firsthand. So, Lauren,
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for giving us a little insight into what it looked like on the field on Saturday. Good luck coming up this week and weekend. If y'all want to keep up with Lauren, you can keep up with her on AL.com and on ESPN. And Lauren, again, just be safe and good luck out there. Let us know how things change.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Ivana.
We will see all of you tomorrow.